The gut is really, really, really important to our health. It is really like command center. If you think about your body being like a spaceship, this is where it's pretty.
Hola, hola, Dr. Alma. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to join us as we will be discussing a very important topic. I've been wanting to invite a guest over so that they can talk about gut health and just like hormonal imbalances and everything else in between and how that impacts the Latina community. And I was so surprised when I met you because you are local to me here in the Chicago area. And I love all that you're doing. And I am very appreciative for you to be here. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I love this platform that you've made for mommies. I think it's really good to start to have these conversations and be really honest and frank about, being a mom and being a Latina mom, which is, a different kind of a level. So thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, before we delve into the conversation, if you can tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Yep. So my name is Alma. I am a first gen Latina. I came here as a baby with my parents, and I grew up my entire life here in Illinois. So this is where I've been, and I grew up in an immigrant household. So I won't go into that. I'm sure you talk about that on this podcast all the time, for bad or good. It's shaped who I am now. And at 19 years old, I actually got pregnant, and that's when I decided that I didn't want my daughter to have the childhood that I had. And so I decided to pursue higher education because I've always been good at school. I like school. So I decided to try to get into pharmacy school. And at that point, and I'm going to age myself, but this was like 20 years ago or so. So college wasn't as accepted. It wasn't as like popular as it is now. And
Mhm.
so I had to figure out how I was going to get there. But eventually I got there. I was accepted at the University of Wisconsin in Madison for their doctorate program. And I picked up my little family, which was my daughter and my then now ex-husband. And we moved to Madison where we didn't know anybody, and I went for it. I got my degree. And then I became a pharmacist. I worked in retail for a little bit, and retail's like your CVS, Rite Aid, Walmart,
Mhm.
whatever. I won't say which one, but it sucked the life out of me. And so
Mhm.
by networking, I was able to go into a hospital pharmacy where I worked with cancer patients, and that's what I've been doing since then.
That is amazing. And what really inspired you to consider pharmacy? I'm curious.
It was my ex, actually. I do have to give him
Oh.
credit for that. So he was a technician at said retail pharmacy, and I was like, well, what does a pharmacist do? Like, I've never heard of a pharmacist. I mean, like at that point, I mean, I was like 19, pregnant, and I'd never even known what a pharmacist does. But he was telling me,
Mhm.
and I was like, you know what? That's cool. It's like a doctor, but not like a doctor where you have to work all kinds of hours and like, crazy on call hours. And that's perfect. So that's why
Yeah.
I decided to go into pharmacy.
Since I've met you, I know that you're pivoting towards something different. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and what made you realize that you needed that transition?
Sure. So I am still practicing as a pharmacist. I really do care for my patients in the oncology space. I'm still in that space. It's a very unique niche of patients, and I have so much respect, and I care for them so much. But my heart and my values has now turned to more holistic care, because being a pharmacist has shown me that there are a lot of medical conditions that we just treat with medicine, but unfortunately, the medical system hasn't gotten into treating things holistically or with a more natural way. So if you talk to your doctor, it's very unlikely. Some doctors do, but it's very unlikely that they'll be like lifestyle changes, right? It's
Mhm.
mostly take this pill and see me in a few months. And so with that respect, I've started to pivot to a more holistic care. So I did get certified in functional medicines, which was not too far of a reach because I already had the clinical knowledge. So
Mhm.
just that certification kind of helped me with the expertise that I need to help people more naturally and holistically.
And for our listeners who aren't familiar or have never heard of functional medicine, what is it and how does it differ from like traditional westernized medicine that we often go to, that we often know of?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, it's not very. It's getting more popular. So
Mhm.
you will start to hear about it more and more. And so functional medicine looks at the whole person. So we look at the person as far as the physical symptoms are important because that's obviously what's causing people to seek help. But there's a lot of other components that go into why that person is feeling that way. And some of that could be mental, like a mental health issue. And some of it could be spiritual and lack of community. They feel lonely, things like that. So we in functional medicine think of health like a three-legged stool. So one is physical, mental, and spiritual. So if any of those are out of balance, you don't really have a balanced health or healthy system. And with regards to conventional medicine, they kind of look at you in pieces. So, like if you have something wrong with your head, you go to a neurologist, you heart, you go to cardiologist, bone, you go to osteopathy. So they kind of treat you in bits and pieces, which sometimes is necessary, but a lot of times they miss the big picture. And a lot of chronic conditions are really whole system things that are happening in the body that are so interconnected, and regular traditional medicine misses that.
Mm. I
So it's a
love how
more,
you define that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a more wholesome view of the person, a more holistic view.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is great. And what inspired you to consider that? I know that you mentioned how, you wanted to bring it into a holistic approach and everything, but I guess from your immigrant background, right? Like how did that really shape your understanding of the healthcare system and especially the barriers that oftentimes Latina women face? Because we're all talking here to Latina women in this podcast. So, how did that really influence you to consider functional medicine then, let's say, going further on to your traditional studies in pharmacy? What made it kind of shift, I guess?
Well, my pivot to functional medicine was mostly just, it was actually more personal. My upbringing was very natural, right? Our parents, they kind of don't like going to the doctor. They don't like unless they really have to. So a lot of times it's treated more at home. Like if you have a fever or something, they don't just give you Tylenol. They put limes on your forehead, right? And
Mhm.
so it's just different upbringing. And when I went to school, I got to tell you that I drank the Kool-Aid. Like they were like, this is the end all be all. You get diagnosed, you get drugs, and you just have to manage it, right? And so I have to, I have to tell you, I came out of there and I was totally like, this is it. Like there's no, and so my mom would be like, no camines sin calcetas, and I'm like, Mom, that's such an urban legend. Like, come on, like, stop it.
Mm.
That's not like you need a virus but there's some truth to that. And that's why some of our ancestors, they have these beliefs because there are things as like such as energy and heat and cold and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of upbringing just kind of brought me back, right? So I
Mm.
kind of moved away when I went to school, and then I was like, maybe mom was right. Like maybe these like old remedies and old like beliefs, maybe they have something to them, even though they're not scientific, right? So that brought me back to kind of a more holistic view. But as far as like the barriers with Latinas, I feel like in general, with the Latino population, there's a lot of barriers. And I see that more clearly when I actually talk to patients in Spanish, because I do get some Spanish speaking patients.
Mhm.
And, when I get the call, because usually it's on the phone, they're very like apprehensive to talk to me, but then I talk to them in their language and I, try to make them feel welcome, and then they start to open up, right? And so I think when there's that barrier, even if it's just a language barrier, cultural barrier, they don't open up. Like they don't ask the questions. They just kind of follow or get the instructions, and that's it, right? But when we communicate in their language, they feel more comfortable. And so
Mm.
I think that's a huge barrier that we have to overcome as a healthcare system. And I honestly think the only way to do that is to just get more of us out there.
Mhm.
We need more doctors and nurses and pharmacists out there to get that,
Yeah.
that barrier kind of a little bit less, difficult for our patients.
Yes, absolutely. And that's just one of the many barriers, like you said. I can think about costs. Like medicine is so
Yeah.
expensive. And you tied the first part of your response about, how you grew up with some traditional healing practices, ¿verdad? Like I definitely grew up with babies even tomando el té de manzanilla,
Mm-hmm.
like those are remedies, and even like the castor oil and all that stuff, like very natural based like remedies that are often almost ridiculed with by Western medicine. And how do you see sort of like functional medicine connecting with the traditional healing practices that our abuelitas used, that your mama used, right? Like our ancestors used. And what are some benefits to still continue on with those traditions?
I love this question because functional medicine is almost like, if you think about it, it kind of just, the goal is to bring you back to balance. So if you have something going on, we still take that medical part and we still look at it. So whatever you have from your doctor, we still look at it, and it makes we do base decisions on that, but then we look at the whole picture, like I said, and then we, like for example, doctor won't look at your hormones, right? But if we see a hormonal imbalance, then we kind of try to fix that. So
Mm,
it just kind of, but we do that based by mostly nutrition. We do some supplements if we feel like they're going to be very helpful, because those are essentially remedios, right?
mm,
So, like the chamomile that you were saying, there's a lot of supplements that are very natural based, and we use those to kind of bring people back to balance, heal their gut, balance their hormones, and then just kind of make them feel better, right? Physically. But the aspect of like our ancestors and the medicinal information, I think, is getting lost, right? Like
mm,
a lot of our ancestors are passing away, and then they're not they're not passing on that information.
mm,
But in functional medicine, you don't really use that. So that's a difference, and that's why I am a holistic practitioner, because I want to incorporate things that we may not be using in functional medicine or traditional medicine, like you said, because it gets ridiculed. But
mm.
we know very well that a lot of this stuff works because we've
Yeah,
used it and it's worked for us.
right,
Yeah.
right. Oh, that's so interesting. Why do you think that like gut health issues, hormonal imbalances, and even chronic fatigue are so prevalent in our community? And how can functional medicine kind of alleviate that?
If we take a look at the labs, right? So I like, let's say for example, you come with a gut health concern. So we take the information that you brought for your doctor, depending on what they have, there could be some stuff that's really usable, but we kind of dig deeper. We want to know. So first thing is that the gut is really, really, really important to our health. It is really like command center. If you think about your body being like a spaceship, this is where it's pretty much run. And people think it's our brain, but
Mm,
it's actually our gut. There's so much going down there, and down there with all the bugs and the everything, and so it just creates a lot of the feelings that we have, a lot of like I mean, not just emotions, but also the chemical reactions that happen in our body. A lot of them happen in the gut. And it's our first immune defense as well. I mean, our skin is, but then it's what we put in our bodies too. It's always constantly checking that too. So, so let's say if there's something going on with the gut health, it doesn't necessarily show up in the gut, but it can show up on your skin. It can show up as like headaches. It can show up as depression. It can show up as so many other things, primarily inflammation based, because your gut's essentially just letting a lot of stuff pass that shouldn't pass. So we really need to tighten up that gut and get it healthy again. So usually with a patient, we will take the labs that come from the doctor, and then we will actually run specialized tests. So we want to look at your poop. Like, what is going
Mhm.
on? What is in this bacteria? What is missing? What is too much? What's not balanced? And then we also can actually test the barrier strength. So our gut, unfortunately, has like this tiny, tiny barrier that if it's, at all like compromised, then it starts to allow things. So that tiny barrier we have to, close up and fix.
Mhm.
So then we look at all of these results, and then we come up with a protocol for the patient to follow. And this is really unpopular because people don't really like to hear this, but the what is causing a lot of this is a lot of the stuff in our environment. So foods, a lot of people think that processed foods are okay, and they may be okay, like rarely, right?
Mhm.
But really, processed foods have a lot of chemicals in them that can disrupt that barrier. And then we're always exposed to toxins. We put toxins on our skin. We breathe in toxins. We drink toxins. It's just everywhere, right? And so that can harm our gut barrier too. And then
Mhm.
there's also, just stress, emotion, right? We live in such a high stress lifestyle here that we're always running around, going to work, stressed out about something. And so that wreaks havoc on our gut too. Even you don't think about it, but it really does. It can cause some issues with the motility. So there's just
Mhm.
so much that we kind of look at, and we do create a plan where we do really encourage patients to cut back on processed foods. That's one of the biggest things. And people don't like to hear that because it is convenient, but we focus on nutritious foods, right? We have a society that eats so much. We have so much food, but everybody's nutritionally deficient, and that's why
Mhm.
because we're not eating the right things. And so we create a plan for nutrition. We create a plan to get their gut healthy again, because there is a way to heal the gut. And once that gut is healed, like people notice a lot of changes just by doing that, just by
Mhm.
getting the nutritional deficiencies taken care of and starting to clean up the gut and heal it. A lot of people feel better just just by that alone. And then everything
Uh,
else and is on top of that is just a bonus, right?
yeah. Wow. Yeah, I've definitely heard that it's all interconnected with your gut, like everything. It can also tie in with fibroids, like for example, like I have fibroids. I'm currently trying to figure out ways on how I can heal this naturally than going straight to hormonal medicine. But unfortunately, in this society and considering the cost associated with that, right? It makes it even more of a barrier for people, especially within our community, to not seek a different opinion, a different form of care when it comes to just trying to get to the root cause. So, what would you say to that? If there is perhaps like someone like you and I who are looking for a second opinion but don't know where to go, how can they start doing research? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, that is a great question, and it is, and it's true. It's hard to find the extra care because the insurance doesn't pay for this care, right? This
Mhm.
is all out of pocket, and it is not accessible for some people because it's not even so much the practitioner work. Like, I do, my work, I do my mental work on creating these plans and things, but the tests themselves are pricey and they're
Mm,
not covered either because they're specialty, right?
right.
So until the insurance can catch up, right? Because you really, the care that you get is what insurance will pay for.
Mm,
Unfortunately, that's the reality because a lot of people need things that the insurance says no, right? And so that makes it less accessible too. But as a solution, like for example, I would say, look, practitioners like me are starting to be more available. So if you
mm,
look up functional health coach, or obviously you want someone who's certified, kind of do your homework, but it is becoming more accessible. It doesn't mean that the price point is still accessible for a lot of people, but they could start just by saying, for example, I could do a lab review, right? And say, look at my labs, what do you see? Right? Because even just doing that, I can pinpoint some things that your doctor might be like, hey, you're fine, but you're really not fine, or you're not
mm,
optimal in my practice, right? In my
mm,
practice, you come to me with a vitamin D of 30. I'm like, you got to go get more vitamin D in your system. I want to
mm.
see 60 or 70, but your doctor's like, oh, you're fine, but no, it's not enough. You need more,
Right,
right?
right.
So it's just little tiny differences like that that could make a big difference physically. Patients
Yeah.
feel better just by doing that. So that's a good entry point. And then there's just different services that you could probably buy what you can afford, right? Until we can get the insurance to like figure it out, that prevention is the key. Getting to the root cause is really where the healing begins. It's just gonna be kind of an extra expense for people, but I also see it in a way that it's an investment, right? You you invest in health, and health is the most important thing that you'll have. If you're not healthy, the only thing that you want is to be healthy. And so that is something that you can't put a price on. Obviously, money does come into play, but it also kind of, you want to prioritize, right? Like we buy a lot of things that we probably shouldn't be buying,
Mhm.
myself included. I'm not judging anybody, but so we can use that money, maybe, put it towards something that could benefit you in the long run, right? Like our health. So it's just a matter of prioritizing it a little more too.
Right. And I often see this with supplements. Like people spend a lot of money on supplements without really knowing what is the root cause.
Yeah.
I often think about that. Like right now, I'm taking probiotics and I'm like, is this really helping me? Is it really helping me solve the actual issue that I have with my gut health? And yeah, we often default for, just like the products and like the marketing, but it's a matter of reflection and really sort of being intuitive with your body.
Yeah.
And if you know that if something's wrong, then there can be another set of eyes like yours, right? To look into those labs a little bit closer than just like the mundane thing, that the doctor would look at. And I often question, like, how am I being compared to based on this, like, graph? Is it based on someone
Yeah.
who genetically comes from, like, Eastern Europe versus someone like me who my ancestors come from, like, Latin America, like, I come from indigenous roots. How does that really look like when it comes to vitamin D? And so it's all of these, like, kind of questions that we should at least ask ourselves and kind of understanding our body a little bit more. And then if we know that there's something missing, then this is when we can look like to you, right? And get your expertise, which is going to be a lot different than, who we talk to at a clinic.
I love that insight, and I love that you start to think about these things because you start to question, right? Like
Mhm.
what is going on? What is really happening, and what is good for my body, right? Just because somebody's doing cold plunges does it mean that you should be doing them, or fasting for, 12 hours a day. Is that right
Yes.
for you? So it's really personalized and everybody's different. So it's, you do really have to follow your intuition and if you can, yeah, get expert advice.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So you definitely mentioned about nutrition being a big part, specifically for like gut health issues, right?
Yeah.
How can we reclaim the nutritional power of our cultural foods instead of feeling ashamed?
I love this question because I don't know who was the smart person who said that Mexican food or Latino food, like really generally in our Latino communities, I don't know who said that it was unhealthy
Mm,
and why people believed it, right? Obviously, fried foods you want to kind of stay away from anyway because that's all dipped in seed oils, probably, that are going to be really super toxic and inflammatory for our bodies. But that's a whole other subject. That's, part of nutrition. But seed oils is something that really causes a lot of inflammation. But our food is actually very nutritious. If you think about really what I mean, I don't know about you, Jessica, but in my home when I grew up, I was eating frijoles, I was eating tortillas, I was eating a piece of pechuga or some eggs, some salsa, and maybe one or two tortillas, right?
mhm.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And that's all whole, nutritious, real food, right? There's
Yeah.
nothing processed about there. Maybe the tortillas, but back then they weren't so processed. But that's what I grew up on, right? That's what we ate.
Yeah.
And we weren't eating like all the stuff that we're eating as we got older. That came from
Mm,
us, right? And so that kind of food is so nutritious. And, like my baby, she didn't grow up eating Gerber. My mom would mash up some
mhm.
banana. She would mash up some frijol juice with tortillas. Like she was eating
Yeah.
just natural foods too. So it's not, it's just, it's just not true. It's not true. Our food is so nutritious. I think the problem though is that I've seen is that people prioritize wrongly or incorrectly, right? So
Mm,
I think that a lot of people get full on the tortillas, they get full on the rice, they get full on the bread, but we really should be getting full on the protein and
mm,
maybe the vegetable salad, salsa, right? Salsa is all vegetables,
yeah.
and filling up on that and not so much on the carbs, right? Carbs are
Right.
not the enemy. They're just they should be not your biggest portion. But, I've
Right.
seen people eat like a dozen tortillas, and it's cool if you're going to go walk around in the sun for hours, right? You can burn it off, but you're probably just in the car and go to the office, and,
Mhm.
so it's probably not going to get burned off. It's probably just going to sit there and cause some weight gain.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I don't believe it. I don't buy it. We eat our Mexican food all the time. My mom still cooks all the time and we love it. And we're pretty good about our nutrition. I do kind of take that over. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we don't keep any junk food in the house or anything like that. So
Yeah.
but we stick to just eating whole real foods, and Mexican food is totally part of that equation here.
Yeah. Yeah, and if a doctor sees you as a Latina, then they're automatically going to assume that we're eating the bad food, and that is, Latino foods.
Yeah.
And so, especially for patients who have diabetes, right? Like that's like the default. Like you need to cut on those tortillas, you need to cut on that rice. So, what would you say to that?
When it comes to diabetes, I think there is a little bit more caution,
Mm,
right? You don't want to eat like you have no idea what you're eating, right? Now we're in a time where if diabetic patients, they can get a lot of care. They have a lot of resources, and a lot of them, which I teach my patients, is they can get a continuous glucose meter. And
mm,
like if you eat a tortilla, your blood sugar might not spike. But if I eat one, it's going to spike. And that's just biological differences. And so those spikes are really bad for diabetics. That's when the organs start to get affected and things if it's constantly like spiking. So it's good to be informed, right?
Mhm.
And so when there's diabetic patients, I do recommend they get one of those, and it's just information, and you can eat and see how it affects your body. And then, if or your partner do it together, it's kind of cool to see what spikes and what spikes for you doesn't for him, for him or her. It just, it's so like, it's so cool, right? It's just kind
Yeah.
of to see your biology. So I do think, yes, they do have to cut back. There's and this is where the nutrition component comes in, right? Somebody who knows, but that's one way to know how it affects you. But the other thing too is that the timing could affect you. So
Mm.
if you eat tortilla first, then your blood sugar could be high all day. But if you eat protein first, you can kind of curve the spike.
Huh.
So there's just different ways to kind of manipulate the body and the nutrition that works for you, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of a good way to it's just not as easy as cut out tortillas, cut out bread. It's more like, let's see how your body works and functions, and let's work with it. And
Yes.
then we can still, obviously I wouldn't recommend cookies and cake and all that, right? But I know it's hard to give up tortillas, because it's just, for a lot of people, it's their staple.
Right. And I think like eating with moderation, and I love how people can utilize that device where they get to recognize their body and get to see it from a visual standpoint. I guess for me, I'm such a visual person where it would be really cool to know how your body is working, and how it's essentially functioning based on the foods that you're intaking. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. I think they're going to be more accessible. Right now, they're kind
Oh,
of pricey
nice.
if you just wanted to see what
Mhm.
happens. But if a patient is diabetic, they can get it covered.
So for the busy mama who is either working or time is just impossible, right? And I think this is like the consequences of having a modern life where we just don't have enough time. And I know that oftentimes it's a mindset work that we have to work on, but literally when it comes to making foods from scratch, it makes sometimes it does make it difficult, and I'm not gonna lie, like, it's convenient to buy something off the shelf rather than make it from scratch, but if I do wanna change my lifestyle, like, what are some tips that you can share to a mama who wants to be intentional in the foods that she eats, but perhaps she doesn't have enough time, and she feels conflicted whether to eat healthy or not, so that it can better improve her body, her gut health, and everything else in between? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it is hard because, like you said, we live in a very high stress, always moving. And one good solution that I found has helped my family is to meal prep. And I know a lot of people roll their eyes at meal prepping, but it really is a game changer. And I cannot emphasize enough how if you spend, if you can, right, a few hours in the kitchen 1 day a week, just meal prep as much as you can, like as much as you can think of. Like, we're going to need lunches these days, we're going to need dinners these days, right? And just to your capacity, what you find would be doable, right? You don't have to do a whole week, you can just do a few days at a time. But that actually saves you a lot of time during the
Mm.
week. Like, you just grab your container and you go, right? And so you do put in the time first, but then in the end, it saves you so much time to just think about what you're gonna eat, go buy the stuff, and then go make it. It really is so easy. In the
Yeah,
end, it like takes practice to get good at it, but once you're good at it, it's really easy. And
right.
so that's one way. And I know it just seems like it's not. It seems like just another thing to do, but in the end, it really is such a time saver. And then just, I think too, we don't have to be neurotic about everything, right? We can do our best and know that we can do our best. So if you can eat nutritious whole foods 5 days a week, and then the next 2 days you're just like, you know what, mom's off. we're ordering a pizza, right? Like, I'm
Right.
not doing this, and so that's fair, right? I
Mm.
think it's more about having that healthy balance too, because it's if you always constantly think about I need to eat this, I need not to eat that, it's just it creates a whole nother stress. But you really want to
Mm.
enjoy your food. You want to make it with love and intention and care, and then you want to eat it and feel good about it, right?
Yeah.
And if sometimes that's buying a pizza and you feel good about it, your body's going to receive it well, right? And
Mhm.
so it's not always like having everything under control 100% of the time, but it's just trying to be a little bit more intentional and use your time a little bit better to make time for other things.
And I can literally see, like, a Sunday night meal prep kind of night.
Yeah.
A lot of us don't do much on Sunday nights, and so this can be a way to start implementing that, and I know my husband and I did it, but then it just didn't work, and so I think it's just a matter of just assigning that day, right, for meal prep, and that way it becomes a part of our routine, it becomes a part of our lifestyle, rather than just, like, thinking that this is an added task that we have to do sort of thing, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we do. Yeah, we actually do Sundays as well. We go grocery shop,
Nice.
but we don't, we're not really strictly regimented. We're just like we need this many breakfasts, this many dinners, and this
Mm,
many like lunches, and then we just create that. So it's not super overwhelming. It used to take us quite a bit of time, but I think we got a good rhythm now, and it takes us
mm,
a couple hours sometimes just to knock it
yeah,
all out.
that's
We're good.
awesome.
You're baking something, you're boiling something, you're like cutting something. You just like time it really well. So it does. It becomes, like you said, a routine.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. So how can we become the generation that breaks cycles of chronic illness and passes down wellness to the next generation?
I think that we are definitely going to be the cycle breakers because we're more aware, right? We're starting to realize that our parents didn't give us everything, but they gave us a lot of knowledge, right? And they gave us a lot to work with, both things that we want to bring into our lives and things that we don't, right? So in that regard, we can leave what's not serving us as a family, as people, head of households, right, mamas,
Mm,
and we can take with us what has been serving us, like that wisdom, and in that way we kind of apply that awareness and knowledge into what we want to how we want to live our lives, right? We don't have to do anything but just live our lives in a way that aligns with our values, and then our kids see that, and
mm,
then our kids can start to implement that in their own way. And I'll just give you an example. So here in the house, we always, since my mom never really gave us junk food, I kind of passed that on to my family, and we just don't have it here. And my daughter eats so much healthier than me. She does. She does. Sometimes I
It's
want a
awesome.
little piece of cake, and I'm like, "You want some?" And she's like, "No, I'm good." And I'm like, okay, wow. So, so you pass them on because they see you. They see what you're
Mm,
doing. They see that it's benefiting you, that you look healthy, you look good. And so they take
mhm.
that upon themselves, and then they also go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I have one final question, and that is, how are you redefining motherhood?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yes, I did not prepare you for that one.
No, I feel like this is controversial, I feel like, but I was very much I was okay not being with my kid 100% of the time.
Mm,
Like obviously with pharmacy school, that was difficult because I had to be separated from her in order for me to pursue this education. That I didn't like. I didn't like that I had to prioritize school over her. And I spent as much time as I could with her without, failing my classes. But
mhm,
in the end, I know that it became a better life for us. in the end. Like I can go to her games. I can, I can be present because I'm not
Mhm.
working all the time. So in that regard, I felt like in the way that I wanted to raise my child, I wanted to give her more time, which is what I didn't have with my parents because they were
Mm.
always working. So that's how I'm redefining it um, in my household. And also, I talked to her about about everything that we weren't supposed to talk about, right? So I was
Mhm.
talking to her about all the things, drugs, sex, everything, right? We were
Yeah.
just totally honest with each other. I mean, I don't know if she was honest with me, but I would just like talk to her about all these things, right? And
Yeah.
make sure that she felt comfortable telling me. Like I could never tell my mom that I had a boyfriend or something. It was just like you don't talk about those things. So that's another way that I didn't want that for her. I wanted her to feel like she could tell me,
Yeah.
anything, right? So
Yeah.
that was something different. And now, with forging her own future, she's 24 now and she's figuring out her life. And I'm not like pressuring her to figure it out. I just feel like she will. It's so hard to figure out what you want to do for your life.
Mhm.
And so I feel like she's a good kid and she contributes. And, if whenever she's ready, she can do what she wants to do, what calls to her, right? So I'm not
Right.
trying to like, you gotta do this, you gotta get your things together. I think she will figure it out.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, she will.
yeah,
She will. And that's good that you have provided this like really open kind of like dialogue, right? Like this kind of support system that oftentimes we didn't grow up. Like we are breaking cycles, we are being intentional of that. But oh my gosh, I can't imagine what are the next generation, like your daughter, my two little ones, like what they're going to do. And then the next generation after that.
yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I think we're doing good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Dr. Alma, where can people follow you? How can people work with you as well, being that you offer a variety of services? So tell us a little bit more about your practice too. I didn't even ask about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I am a functional health coach. That's what my business is. And I can work in different aspects. So right now, I'm actually going to run a cohort for the summer. It's kind of like more of an educational piece with some one-on-one coaching. So it's more like of a group effort, and you have some accountability with the community. So really, that's just information on how to get healthy. And I plan to run those at least twice a year.
Okay.
So I know I'll probably have those coming up in the future. And then also working with me one on one. So just going to my website or Instagram, booking a call. If you need help with figuring out what's going on or you have a specific question, you can always call me and see if it's something that I can help you with. You can work, just a month, 3 months, 5 months, whatever your commitment is to improving your health. We can work something out as far as like packages. And then that could include tests if you need them. So I can order tests and interpret those and kind of give a plan based on those results. So it just depends on what you're looking for, but I'm happy to help in any way I can. And I also do the lab reviews. So I know that we talked about that being an entry point at just kind of looking at what you already have, where you are now. So I can do
Yeah.
that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll include the links in the show notes.
Okay.
That way people can visit your page and follow you as well. Unfortunately, there isn't enough representation. So I'm so glad that you are in this space because I'm sure that you can talk to patients at least who identify as you, right? Like you are saying it from a cultural standpoint. And so I'm so glad that we have someone like you who can work with people like us. I'm really appreciative for you to be in this space and also to share everything that you have done and what you're doing. It's such an exciting time. So I wish you the best of luck, especially as you're building on this new cohort of yours coming up this summer and hopefully later on in the year as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. This is what aligns more with me and my values and my heart. I really want to help people to feel better and not just rely on medicine all the time and to know that
Mhm.
the healing capacity is within them. They can
Mm.
find ways to feel better just naturally, holistically. if if they really want that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
thank you
That's
so
amazing.
much for having me. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alma. I really appreciate it as well.